Do you have a shady part of your garden that you don't know what to do with? Of course you do. Everybody's got a shady part in their garden, whether that shade's cast by a tree or by some sort of structure. Unless, of course, you have a flat, plantless piece of land as far as the eye can see. If that's you, then this video isn't for you. Go ahead and shut it off right now. But for the rest of us, we're sure to have some shady spots that are squandering their potential. And these spots can be really productive if you just plant the right thing. Today, I'm going to share with you 10 plants that just love the shade. That way, you can pack more abundance into that already bountiful food forest. So I'm going to start it off today the way most YouTubers don't. I'm going to share with you my favorite plant to grow in the shade first, instead of saving it for last. So what is that favorite plant, you might be asking? Well, I bet it's a favorite on a lot of your lists, but maybe you just didn't know that it thrives in the shade. That plant, my friends, is cacao. Who doesn't like the idea of growing their own chocolate? Now, I'm just getting started growing cacao. I haven't always had this much shade in my garden. That's because gardens evolve over time. I started off with sun-loving annuals, and now I need shade-loving perennials. And hopefully soon, one day, I'll be turning that cacao into a chocolate bar. Cacao is a great plant to grow in the shady understory of a tropical food forest. The plant doesn't get very big, maybe about 10 feet max. I haven't seen it get much bigger than that. And you know what, guys? It is a beautiful plant. Seeing those colorful pods growing off the trunk and the way that it's shaped underneath the canopy of your larger trees, I just love the way cacao looks inside of an orchard or a food forest system. Cacao grows really easily from seed, but in order to get a good variety that you know has certain qualities, you're gonna have to graft it. And if you're thinking about purchasing any seeds today that I talk about, I do have an online seed store where I sell a lot of these tropical shade-loving plants. I'll be sure to leave a link for it down in the description below. The next shade plant on my list that's right behind cacao is one that my wife really loves. In fact, 74% of Americans can't live without this crop for a single day. I'm talking about coffee. Coffee has a long history here in Hawaii. Have you ever heard of Kona Coffee? Coffee thrives in the shady tropics. And I have some growing right here under my ice cream bean and ulu tree. I planted this coffee plant a few years ago, but it's gone through the ringer. I've weed whacked it a couple times. The sheep ate it down to a nub, but here it is, still kicking. But you're gonna need a lot more coffee than this if you want to brew a couple cups of your own. This here was just for fun. But who knows, maybe I'll get 1 cup one day. Now this next plant just thrives in the shade. It could be grown as a small shrub, a small tree, an edible hedgerow, you name it. You could prune it into whatever shape you want it. And it grows great underneath the canopy of larger trees. Only thing is though, I'm not a big fan of this fruit. It has a kind of really tarty, sour flavor to it, but I know a lot of people who love it. You may have already guessed this plant by now. It is the Suriname Cherry. Originally from Brazil, now found all over the tropics. It is a really beautiful tree in the landscape. And the fruits look pretty cool just hanging there, don't they? And it has a powerful vitamin C kick, cementing their place among some of the world's most popular superfoods. But I think in order to enjoy this plant, you gotta mix it with a little something. I've had it as a sorbet and also in smoothies, and when you mix with some honey or some sugar, it tastes a lot better in my opinion. But that's just me. You may be one of those who just love to eat the fruit straight up. I know my son does. Suriname cherries grow really easily from seed. In fact, I always see little seedlings popping up from fruits that I don't harvest from the previous season. And once again, I have these for sale on my site, so check out that link down below. This last fruiting plant on my list is one of my kids' favorites. When it's mulberry season, you'll see the kids out here munching on these berries all day long. Mulberries can thrive in the sun and in the shade. Mine here is growing in a pretty shady spot, and it tends to produce tons of fruit. Granted, it might fruit a little bit better in the sun, but it still does pretty well in the shade. I prune my mulberries pretty heavily because they like to grow on 1 to 2 year old wood. That's how you can ensure more fruit in shady areas. And besides that, it makes harvesting them a whole lot easier. And plus, whatever you prune, you can just stick right into the ground and create a whole new tree. I've seen mulberries thrive in the tropics all the way to the temperate climates. So if you have a shady spot in your garden that could use a small shrubby tree, why not plant a mulberry tree? Did you know sweet potatoes could be a shade-loving plant? Well, here they are growing in the shade right behind me. But What you won't get from this is very many tubers. What you are growing sweet potatoes for in this instance are for the greens. Sweet potato greens are delicious and they're packed full of vitamins. I just love how sweet potato greens can cover up a bare shady patch in my garden and produce edible greens for me. These areas in my garden used to be neglected and now they're producing food. And if you got a spot like this in the tropics, why not think about planting sweet potatoes as your edible ground cover? Another edible green that thrives in the shade here in the tropics is Lao Pele, or edible hibiscus, or bele, or Tongan spinach. It goes by so many names. This plant is a great superfood to be growing in the shady patches in your garden. And the only thing is, when you cook it, it tends to get a little bit slimy. So I like to cook it in stews and soups where you don't notice that slimy texture as much. When you cook it that way, it is delicious. It's just like spinach or any other green that you would cook inside of a soup. Lao Pele grows really easy from cutting. All you got to do is find a shady patch in your garden and stick that branch into the ground and you'll have some beautiful leaves growing out just like this right here. That's what I did with this one, and you can see how well it's thriving. Another plant that seems to thrive in the upper elevations in shady areas here in the tropics and on the mainland is Nasturtium. That's right, Nasturtium can grow here in the tropics. It's growing all over Volcano here on the Big Island, which is about 4,000 feet in elevation. You'll see it just thriving in the shady spots up there. And those flowers can be great additions to any salad. They provide a sort of nutty, peppery taste that is just delicious. If you love salads, then you're going to want to add nasturtium flowers to make them even better. Now, ginger is another crop that can grow well in the shade. But what's unique about this is it's a root crop. Not many root crops thrive in shady situations like this, but ginger can. Now, the ginger behind me isn't exactly the edible type of ginger. The edible type right now is dormant, but I have ginger growing in the shady areas of my garden and it just seems to thrive. I know that it likes a little bit more sun, but if you have some dappled light, you can get away with planting some ginger in those spots and still be able to get some sort of harvest out of it. So if you're looking for a root crop to grow in the shade, consider ginger. And you may also want to consider another root crop that thrives in the shade. And that plant is Ava or Cava, which is growing right here behind me. Ava loves the shade, especially in the wet tropics here. And if you have shady spots, you should plant as much Ava as you can because it's a high value crop. Cava or Ava grows really well from cutting. All you got to take is a cutting of a branch that has 2 to 3 nodes and stick it in the soil. And if you have a coconut tree growing nearby, even better. Cava and coconut tend to be companion plants. Cava really thrives in soil with broken down coconut husks. So if you have a coconut tree that's providing some shade, now we have something to do with it. Plant some Cava. And the last plant on my list is an herb, and it's probably one you haven't heard much of unless you've been watching my channel. And this herb that thrives in the shade here in the tropics is called Culantro. It has flavors similar to cilantro, hence the name Culantro. It's very popular in Puerto Rican cooking. It's used a lot more there in the Caribbean than it is out here. But if you're looking for a really strong cilantro flavor, then Culantro is a plant for you. And if you want to learn more about this plant, you should check out that video that I made all about Culantro. It has a lot more information than I'm going to share with you here because I got one more bonus plant for you and then we're all done. This last bonus plant is not exactly edible for you and I, but it is a great plant to be growing in your garden. You can see it right here. It is comfrey. I love growing comfrey as a way to block weeds from getting in my garden beds. It acts as an impenetrable barrier for grasses and weeds. So if you want to edge out a garden bed, put comfrey there on the edge. It's perfect for that. Comfrey is also a great compost starter. It breaks down really quick and gets your compost activated super fast. And it's claimed that animals like to eat comfrey, even though I've had sheep and chickens and goats here and none of them really touched it. But I've heard people say that their animals eat comfrey. So maybe it's some sort of last ditch sort of famine food, some survival food that they won't touch till nothing's left. I don't know. But there you have it, guys. That is my list of 10 shade plants that thrive in the tropics, including an extra bonus here, comfrey. And guess what? For those of you who made it all the way to the end of this video, I want to thank you. I put together a nice little PDF that covers all of these shade plants and a few more. And if you want to pick that up, I also included a link for it down below.